I'm wondering, I'm hoping everyone else is in a good mood and ready to participate today. I'm going to use a very much discussion style, as we've used in the past, to try and engage people, which I'm sure we're all used to doing as coaches, right, in our normal work. So I've got a bit of an agenda. The timing's a bit loose, but it's taking the format that we've been using over 5 sessions. So a bit of a welcome, an introduction to the idea of the day. So today the idea is to set intention, to give time and space to somebody else for them to think, for themselves almost. But yeah, you're trying to give them a space. And then we'll get into some discussion about, well, when's that a good idea and who do we want to do it with? And then I'm going to set up a challenge at the end. I hope it's going to work. To encourage you to practice more silence when you actually get back to work. So we'll be trying a few silences today, I suspect, as what I have been doing over the past few sessions to help people contribute. So if I stay silent long enough, somebody usually fills the space. So I'm relying on you again today. And then we'll have a discussion at the end to see if you accept the challenge. So why this webinar series? Well, we've got a green wrapper on here. Most important thing that I'm here for is to challenge your coaching culture. I think you all can influence your surroundings by behaving in a certain way. You have a chance to influence. You can't control it, but you can certainly influence. And I hope at the end of the session, you've got some ideas and you become a bit wiser and willing to try something different and go out and experiment. And through that practice, you'll hopefully become wiser. So I'm always trying to prompt thinking, encourage awareness, inspire you to try things out, because nothing is black and white in human relationships. So, you know, we all have to make up our own minds what works with certain people in what situations. And yeah, hopefully we'll support learning through all that practice. Okay, so for those that haven't been on the sessions before, let me just do a brief recap of the 5 sessions. Essentially, I've tried to get across that all conversations are underpinned by relationship. So we have to consider relationship always. Relationship is an entity that needs two-way commitment. So whoever's involved in that relationship, they're contributing to it. And then all stakeholders in any conversation have a view on its effectiveness. So we just need to keep that in mind. And we've talked about listening, questioning, and now today we're talking about giving time and space, which is part of good communication. Okay, so my first question to get us all involved. So I've laid out my store. So I don't know what your intentions are today. So I'm going to invite you to speak or share things in the chat. It's up to you. So if you want to tell me why you're here or what you're looking for, that would be great. But also I have a question to get you started. What does it feel like when others give us time and space for thinking or speaking? So would anyone like to share their ideas?
Hi, Shirley. Hi, hello.
Wow,
this is quite an interesting question that you're actually asking, because sometimes when you're actually given that time and space, you sort of panicking and thinking that you have to give an answer, for example, in a meeting.
Yep.
So I think it actually depends sometimes where you are and who you're with as well. Because sometimes it can actually feel as if you actually you have to give an answer instead of, you know, just taking that time back and, you know, think about what you're going to say.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for being brave. And you've led into my idea that it doesn't always feel okay. So good. You know, there's the times when it's good to be like that, and sometimes it doesn't feel so good. So actually the setup, the environment to be able to have this space and time to speak needs to be set up. It doesn't always feel right. So we have to choose the moments when it feels right. So yeah, that's great. Thank you. So any other thoughts? What kind of
Hi, Shirley.
situation? Hi.
Yeah, this is Abby. Still in the same line of thought, really. Yeah, I think it's very okay if one gets opportunity to get to come back with feedback, and on any particular instances, except the one that's really determined, or you need to answer there and there. Yeah, it's a great thing if one gets opportunity to get to go back and come back to feed the back. So that's my thoughts.
So if someone invites us to speak and looks as though they're interested in us speaking, that probably feels okay. Is that a good précis of what you said?
You mean me?
Whoever just spoke, was that Addy or Abby? You're both very similar names, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's Abby. No, what I was saying, that from the question you asked, that how does it feel when other gives you time and space? Yeah, I'm saying that's a very good way, but it rarely happens. But if it happens that you're given time to come back, you'll be able to organize your thoughts. So I think I really buy into this. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So it's great if someone gives us a space. Then if we need to think about our thoughts, perhaps we haven't actually got everything, we haven't got the answers all set, ready and waiting. And I think that's the point. I think all of us are very, very busy. So sometimes we get put on the spot and have to think on our feet because our mind's full of other things as well. So sometimes it can feel uncomfortable. But as long as people give us the space and appreciate that we might have to gather our thoughts and think about what we're going to say before we actually say it, then it can feel quite nice. And then we get a chance to explain. And I think also being invited can feel good. So I'm gonna move on. So it's good that you're all thinking about that. So the idea of this was to get you to start thinking. The thing I wanted to recognise is a question of that let's recognise that we all need time to think. We're all very busy. I think that's really important. So recognising that and giving people chance to slow down a bit, slow the pace, and to enable thinking, that's really important. Okay, so I'm going to use my model. Just to put things in context, I find this really useful, and this is the first time I've dared to say that the outer ring, the intentions, are the number one thing. So setting up an intention to support somebody else to think, it is going to come first in our considerations. So I totally believe that our intentions drive our soft skills. So what we're intending to do with someone else actually helps us to decide what to do. So, if we recognize that somebody needs time and space to think, then, I've got to work out whether I'm willing to actually be that person, to be present in the moment, or I've got so many other things on my mind, I can't actually listen to them properly right now. So maybe I choose another time. So there's a lot going on in my mind, but I have to kind of make up my mind to then be in the position to create the space and allow the other person to think. So, quite a lot on me to create that space and actually be believable that I'm ready to listen. So there's quite a lot going on behind the scenes, so to speak, in our minds and brains. Right, today's session, I'm going to take a lot from this book, Time to Think, by Nancy Klein. And I don't know whether you've all seen this book. Those of you who are coaches will probably know that she's quite a famous person in the coaching world. I think she's at Henley Business School, or visiting professor or something. But even though she's American born. And she talks about thinking environment a lot, which is really a coaching space. So what she says is thinking for yourself is not a popular activity. In fact, she heads up one of her chapters saying thinking is a radical act, which is quite controversial, but she definitely has an opinion. For example, she says, in most circles, particularly in places that shape our lives, families, schools, most workplaces, thinking for yourself is regarded with suspicion. Some institutions thwart it on purpose. It can be seen as dangerous. And she gives a story about being in a networking situation and talking to a guy who was asking her about her upcoming book. And she said that it was about people, about how people can help each other think for themselves. And this person apparently said, oh dear, I don't think much of that. I prefer people to do as they're told. I later found out he was the 4th generation president of one of the world's largest oil companies. So it'd be interesting to know whether you agree with her strong views. So she does ask the question, when was the last time somebody asked you, what do you really, really think? Really? And give time, and you're then given time to answer. So can anyone share when they were last asked what they really, really think? So I'm going to pick on somebody. Anyone disagree with Nancy Klein? Well, perhaps I should ask if you agree.
I think with this question, Shirley, even when as people, sometimes we don't really give the answer to what we actually really thinking. So even though this question would actually be posed and it would actually be asked and you actually pose to think about it, sometimes we actually give answers to actually suit the audience rather than giving the answer of what you really think.
Yeah.
So yeah. So it is a good it is a good question, but I think a high percentage of people, if people would actually be honest with themselves, depending in the situations they're in, they wouldn't really give the answer that they're really thinking about.
Yeah, I agree with that. Politics is everywhere, right? We have to be very careful what we say when.
Yeah.
But if I think Nancy's point is that because we've got this kind of cultural view that people don't think for themselves, then we don't encourage it. And then quite often people aren't aware of what their real views are because they don't express them very often. And very, very small number of situations do they actually get their thoughts out into the world. They stay in their heads too long, don't come out into the world and actually get checked out, in a sense.
Shirley, sorry, Asida here.
Okay.
I think this is a great question, and I think that at some point I've been guilty of it because there are sessions where you're time constrained, and you go in and based on the mood of the people, if they're communicative, if they're vocal, if there's something in it for them, then you don't even have to ask before everyone starts contributing, in which case you're getting a lot out of it. But sometimes, depending on the topic, people don't want to contribute, or people might be scared, or people might not have the personality type that they can allows them to communicate vocally. Yeah. So it can be a bit draggedy. So you then have to, you ask the question to demonstrate that you're asking, but then you go in with answers, to what you've asked. So it's a tricky one, really, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So I really wanted you to start thinking about what your culture's like. What are you really asking people what they really, really think? So perhaps view of the time we won't share that, but just think what your environment is like. And generally, what are people trying to, what's the environment that people are trying to create? Are we creating thinking environments for people to get their thoughts out there and start learning about themselves and what they really think, and so develop? You know, we all need to develop, and coaching culture, agile coaching culture, I think, is about getting people to develop, and they need to think to do that. So another view from Nancy probably just repeats what Abby just said. All right, when we're given the space, we can be reluctant, and we often say what we're supposed to think and not, or what we think is acceptable, rather than airing our views, quite often because our views aren't tested. So again, I'm using my soft skill model, all right, and this idea that, you know, we have to air intentions. So if it's right to have some time and space to think things through, maybe we need to talk about that and air that intention for a particular conversation. So even if it's 10 minutes, you know, right, let's have an honest conversation in the next 10 minutes about this. All right, we can actually create an environment that's safe if we know, if we have a sufficiently good relationship with someone to do that. So the discussion I'd like to get into is, when do we want other people to do some thinking, and who could benefit from thinking time? So I'm assuming that you've all got some kind of leadership role or influence on the team that you're working in. So when does your team do some thinking? Is it best for you to do it as a group? Hi, is this Wally?
Yeah, I think I can kickstart that. So for my team, more often is when we're dealing with highly valuable activities, and it involves maybe a brainstorming kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Did you get that?
yes, that's sort of group work, isn't it? And there's quite, I say, brainstorming. So there's a bit of a process going along with that. So for the sort of conversation I'm talking about, maybe I'm thinking more one-to-one. So to actually enable people to really think. So maybe when in a team, do you actually give people a minute to actually speak that's uninterrupted, for example? So I could imagine a process where we go around the room and everybody gets a minute to express their opinion on something. That would be great. Do you see what I mean? When do you use?
Yes,
maybe I should ask
like,
the question. When do you use silence?
Okay, so I think there are some on the chat here. I have feedbacks during feedbacks.
Okay,
I have
I can't see
performance
that.
reviews here. Yes.
Right, let me good. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe the discussion is around, well, how do you set that up then? How do you know that's a good thing? And so how do you know when to set that up, and how do you set it up? It sounds like you know when to do it. So performance reviews, we know, it's confidential. We have to kind of set up the right environment, an independent space, one-to-one, confidential, all that stuff. So we know when to do that, or feedback, I guess, is the same or similar.
Shirley, just a quick question. When do we want others to think? Don't we want people to think always?
Well, yeah, I think so.
William, that was my answer in my head. You want people to think always, yeah.
So when do we give them the time to think? That is the question.
I think it's an assumption to say that we're all in a role whereby and it's a good assumption, because maybe some people are in a role whereby they are given that opportunity to think, whereas others not so much. And what you will find is they are told, what to do, or maybe processes to follow or approaches to follow, which are called best practices within the organization. So when you say, are you given time to think, or are you given space to think? In my current role, am I given space to think, and am I given time to think, or am I asked what do I think? I am asked what do I think, but the question is, do they really want what do I think, or do they just want to hear what they think?
Yeah.
And I just give them what they think, because, sorry about the noise, because sometimes what I think is not acceptable.
Yes,
Yeah, I don't know if there's anyone that feels that way, but sometimes what I think is just maybe not acceptable, or maybe not in the line of thought the way the business is sort of looking to progress. So that's just me.
Yeah.
So I totally, sorry, Asida here. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Carry on.
I totally agree with you, because that ties in with what I said earlier on, that what the person, the deliverer, wants to get out of the session and what they ask you are two different things. What their inputs, their expectations are two different things. They usually have an agenda.
Yeah. So maybe that's a way to do it. It's like, when are you allowed to have your agenda? When are you given that opportunity to actually think out loud what you really think? So I totally hear you, and I think it's normal, all right, for our environment. And what we're trying to do is change culture. So in the agile coaching culture, we're all supposed to be, autonomous, highly performing and autonomous. So have our own views. So somehow we have to have an environment where we can share honest views. So I'm really asking, how do we achieve that? Well, probably little by little, and doing a more engaging way of giving space and time, increasingly, by practicing it and getting better at doing it, so that people get more used to it. Sometimes people don't like to be asked questions because they haven't prepared. So some amount of thinking for yourself has to possibly go on your own. There's an expectation for that. But sometimes when people are needing to develop in a certain way, a conversation, perhaps that's the time to say, right, let's have a conversation about this to see what you really think. Because actually you want them to air what they're really thinking in order to get it out in the open. So I think you have to choose your moments, but I think it's possible. And that kind of leads me to my challenge of the session. I've moved my cursor, haven't I? Sorry. Are you all seeing the agenda rather than, resume slideshow, sorry. So my challenge today is to intend to be supportive sometimes. So choose some moments when you think, actually, just want people to be open and tell me what they really think. And I'm going to give them 5 minutes or 2 minutes, whatever you want to give them to actually think out loud. So if you give them that space, you're going to have to be prepared to be fully present and do that good listening. And you're probably going to have to encourage them as well to set up the space and to convince them that you are really going to stay silent. So what if we just practice for a quick minute now before we get back to seeing if you accept my challenge, is to say, just imagine that you're saying to me, I want to, sure I've got the chat in the right place. I want to hear your views, so I will just listen to you for 2 minutes or until you ask me to reflect what I've heard. All right, so I'm going to imagine that you're saying that to me, and I'm going to read you a bit more from Nancy Klein's book. And I'd like you to really listen to me as though you're being fully present. Obviously, you know, it'd be great if it was face to face, and Nancy Klein does a lot of practice where people speak for 2 minutes and the other in pairs. So one person speaks for 2 minutes and the other person sits and is silent for 2 minutes and just listens, which is really hard work. If you ever do that with a colleague, just to practice, that would be great practice. Just practice doing that. Take it in turns, because sitting there for 2 minutes looking at someone speaking is very challenging. But let's just use our ears today. So I want you to really concentrate, and then just be aware when your attention disappears, or when you start judging what I'm saying. All right. So, because really, I just want you to listen to me and what I'm thinking, and pretend that what I'm reading is what I think. Okay. So if it is one thing to ask you to cultivate ease, to enjoy quiet, to communicate respect, to stop interrupting and let people finish, to give equal turns even in hierarchy, to help others do their own thinking. Competition stifles encouragement and limits thinking, and what we need is encouragement. Now, maybe you disagree with the competition idea, because competition is the driving force behind capitalism and sport and technical progress, isn't it? But think about it this way: competition between people ensures only one thing, that if you win, you will have done a better job at whatever it is that the other person did. That does not mean that you will have done a good job, just a better one. To compete does not ensure certain excellence. It just ensures comparative success. And the problem with that is that it distracts us from examining what good might actually be. Until we can let go of having to compete, it will be nearly impossible to ask the question, what would good be? Competition in a thinking environment is particularly hazardous, because competition between thinkers fractures your fortitude to ask the questions nobody wants asked. If it keeps your attention on the rival, not on what you really think. So if the listener feels competitive with the thinker, you cannot communicate this level of encouragement. Competing with the thinker, you may do any number of things to prevent them from being brilliant. For example, you might curl your lip or shake your head or just look away in order to hold the person back from bright ideas. Conversely, if the person thinking is competing with you, trying to seem more creative or clever than you, they will not be able to pursue their own ideas fully or honestly. So I'm going to stop there, and I really wondered how long it took you before you felt your listening was disappearing. Any reactions to what I read?
Okay, Shirley, for my thoughts, it was a lot to listen to and to remember, because all I can remember now is competition.
Yeah.
So I think the word competition dominated the conversation, and sometimes I could shift my listening, and then when I come back, the word competition still rings in my mind. So is it that sometimes we pick words and they stay with us for a while, or when listening? I am wondering.
I think listening is very hard. I didn't give you the context, so the context was relevant. So a thinking environment and kind of setting things up with people, setting up a space for thinking. But it was coming out of the blue. But when people speak what's in their heads, it doesn't always make sense to us because they're sharing what's in their heads and not what's in our heads. So getting that rapport and that level of connection so we can understand is quite challenging. So I suspect you would need quite a few questions at the beginning to set this up. But also I agree that if you speak for 2-3 minutes, you can get lost. So I think it's normal. What I'm trying to show here, this is difficult, but worth the practice, because the fact that you remembered competition is really important. So hopefully I've sown a seed, even though I only spoke for a very short time, for you to think about competition when you're listening now to people, either whether you're listening or speaking. Are you conscious of competition with the other person and judging what they're saying? I know I frown when people are speaking if I disagree with them. But when I'm asking people to think out loud, I will try very, very hard not to. So my natural judgment self in any conversation is always there. I'm picking holes in things all the time. But as soon as I set up a conversation to engage people in thinking, then I will do my very best not to do that, even though I know it's hard. Does that help, William? Does that make sense? I know I didn't answer your direct question because you want to know how it worked, but I think I'm trying to say less frustration with not remembering, because it is hard.
Yes, Shirley, it did work. I think we could hear as well from everyone who also listened. Maybe, or let me call Ravi to share.
I'm not there. Thank you for that. I kind of reflecting on what said. One, yes, to start with what William said, I could really remember the competition, and summary-wise, I think, yeah, something about competition. How do I address the competition? How do I survive in the competition kind?
Yeah.
And I had to really, really concentrate what is coming next. When I finish one sentence, I'm trying to understand, reflect on what you said. And before I understood completely, the next sentence is coming.
Yeah.
So it is a bit of hard work for me.
Yep.
While listening, while trying to understand, and also doing some assumptions on what I'm going to hear next.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think, as you rightly said, it's what we face day in, day out, right? We don't know always what the other person is going to speak to us.
No, exactly. And but you make an important point that if you set up a thinking environment, slowing down is probably very good. But people not everyone speaks slowly. So sometimes you've got a very fast speaker, they give you a load of detail, story, they don't talk in the big picture, so it's really hard to kind of see where they're coming from immediately. So yeah, I agree, it's challenging. But I also agree that slowing down, creating a space where the pace is slower and using a slower voice would be very advantageous when you're doing that contracting for the thinking space.
And absolutely, and also the accent matters, isn't it?
Say that again, Ravi.
The accent, how I speak.
That can be challenging too. But all the more reason
how the other person understands makes huge difference.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just do a straight challenge, because I can see the time's going and people are disappearing. So the question is, will you accept the challenge, go away and practice, giving people a bit more time by using silence more and actually setting up a conversation that says, right, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to talk to me, and then I'll just listen.
Yes.
Who was that a yes from? I get one yes.
This is
or-
Ravi. This is
Hi,
sorry.
Ravi. It's a yes from you. How about everyone
It's an
else?
yes from me, Ravi.
Yes.
It's a yes for me as
Yes,
well.
Roy.
Yes,
Yeah, yes from me.
fantastic. All right, so next time we talk, maybe you can let me know or email me or how it's going with your practicing.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Yeah. So your challenge as a facilitator is to set it up nice and carefully, and create the feeling of space and time, and they can speak slowly because you're really going to listen. Fantastic.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any questions?
All good here, no questions.
Right. So anyone feeling challenged too much, over challenged? Oh, this is sweet. No, none. Okay. I'm expecting great things next week then.
Shirley,
Thank you.
I think I am over challenged because in all situations you are being asked to say what you think. So whether you thinking or not thinking, you are in some way thinking. So as humans, we are thinking beings, whether the other person listens or not, we are always in that thinking mode. So it makes thinking a universal thing instead of it being situational. That's what I've been rummaging on my mind, or that's what I've been pondering over, that we are thinking beings, whether we think at the moment or not, we are always thinking. I don't know if that's what the Nancy says in her book as well.
Yeah, I think I was trying to put across the idea from her today is that quite often we're thinking in relation to other people. So just like, we talked about the politics earlier and having to be careful what you say, we're actually making judgmental thinking.
Okay.
All right. I'm talking a little bit about developmental thinking. So actually, I have got my own ideas squared away in my head. So I'm thinking in an agile environment, have I made a contribution that I really believe into what I'm doing or into the project that I'm working on? So, am I doing what I think is right? Have I made a contribution? What do I really think? So it's just being more conscious of ourselves, really, and understanding where we are. We might be very happy with where we are and just coasting along, but with the agile culture is meant to be trying to encourage everyone to grow. So unless people examine what they're really thinking, and they won't grow. So am I making sense? Can you see a difference between judgmental thinking, situational thinking, and developmental thinking?
Sure, Shirley. Thanks so much.
Okay.
I think that's probably the
Shirley,
challenging
just
part
one.
or difficult part,
Oh,
isn't it?
sorry.
How we separate our thinking into a focused direction at a particular point of time based on the context.
Yeah. Okay. So you've got some context in mind. This is why I said, when do we want to get people to think and when do we not want to get them to think? So people came up with, feedback sessions, performance reviews. That's when we want them to think. But actually, as William says, we want people to think always. We always want them to contribute. We always want them to help solve problems. The innovation part of Agile, is very strong.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes we don't know what we are thinking about as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the brainstorming idea from Wally, because that just says, well, there's no judgment, and that is a safe space that you've created for brainstorming, and people will throw ideas in. Quite often, they're not given ideas long enough to explain where they're coming from. So, if it's fast and furious ideas coming in. So if people are given a bit more longer to explain, that's great format.
Yeah.
Sometimes the ideas are complicated, aren't they? So unless you actually start explaining it, you don't actually know for sure whether it's going to work or not if it's an innovative idea.
Yeah. I think the brainstorming aspect is an interesting one. The reason is I remember consciously checked the thinking process for the people who are participating. And the intention of the brainstorming, as we all know, is to just give our ideas to the group together without being judgmental about how good our idea is or how good is somebody else's idea is. What I observed, including me, I think, when I'm part of the brainstorming group, we give an idea and we think about our idea. The moment somebody else gives some idea, I'll stop thinking and I start thinking how good the other person's idea is.
Well, great. It's great if it's a good one.
It is, and we're being judgmental there, isn't it?
Yeah. It's
and in that process, I realized that I stopped thinking myself about what I can contribute, and also thinking about how others' idea is, and the idea which I gave, is it better than their idea or their idea is better than mine? I started comparing, being judgmental.
See, this is where competition comes in. So, that piece I read from Nancy Klein's book at the end, this is why I sowed the seed of competition, because that comparison that we do is part of our competitive culture.
True.
That's where it's coming from. That's her point. That's where it's coming from. So if we could just suspend all that competition while we're brainstorming, then the brainstorming would be great. And it's the perfect environment of setting up a safe thinking environment that everyone's contributing to without judgment. So
absolutely.
But you're highlighting her point exactly, because the people speaking, it's not just the listener that can be judging, it can be the speakers as well. So really important point. Because it hampers what we'll say. This is when we only say what we're supposed to think, not what we really think.
True.
Okay. Oh, I hope this is really good. The conversation's really good. So obviously you're all thinking really well and taking it all on board. So I'm really impressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. It was a very useful session for myself too. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, well, anyone can email me if any feedback's always welcome. How it could have been improved, or anything else you need. I'm very happy to have contact with anyone. So I think that's me done. I think we've done questions. Over
Thank
to
you for the
Wally.
fantastic session.
Did you find it okay?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. It was a fantastic session.
Did Angela want to say something?
No, I just wanted to say thank you. It was very good, very useful.
Thank you. Very useful.
Thank you. Please join us tomorrow. We've got a cloud session with Yusuf. I'll be sharing the link later today. But thank you, everyone. And thank you, Shirley.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thanks very much for all your participation.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.